ADHD video. So for today, what we're going to talk about is ADHD and how it impacts relationships, and what perhaps we can do to help out ourselves and our significant other that might have ADHD, or perhaps a close friend or family member. So there are multiple tools that we can utilize in order to help out. Knowledge truly is power. The more we know ourselves, the more we know our partner, the more we know our friend or family member or colleague, the better we can help them out. And vice versa, it goes both ways. The better you can also be helped out as well. Whether it be by you refining yourself or by somebody else helping you out with the needs that you need. So while in grad school, thankfully, I was blessed with quite a bit of helpful resources they provided me that I wanted to help you guys out with too, because they have been of a lot of help to me. And after reading so many posts on Health Unlocked about one partner being fed up or up the wall with their significant other or spouse, and after speaking and working with a lot of people myself who have ADHD, and seeing the struggle in their own relationships, I really want to bring some insight and I really want to bring some help, because having ADHD is no joke, as I've said in a lot of other videos. So I really want to help you guys out with that. Every relationship, every individual requires different needs and expects different things, and the ADHD can certainly complicate this. And we have to understand that there exists taking care and helping out the ADHD, that there also exists taking care and helping out the person and the unique nature of their personality, cognitive functions, and what they need. So, and this one's going to be a little mixture of both. So I wanted to provide a couple of resources to help you and your partner out. Let's do a little deep dive, shall we? Resource number one, we have the Myers-Briggs, the infamous MBTI exam. Carl Jung and the 16 personality types. Now, amongst those 16 foundational personality types, there exist subvariants of those personality types, and there are millions of subvariants. So you can have two people with the same personality, they can be two different people entirely. So what I recommend you do, I left the link down below where you can take the examination and find out what your own personality and cognitive functions are. And then you can find out your significant others as well. So I recommend you take the test 3 times and be completely honest. And if you don't know a word or what something means, please look it up. You want to be as realistic and as honest as possible to yield the best results. So I recommend you check that out. And then you find out more about yourself. And it's going to help you understand more of this video. And then perhaps, if you'd like, you can watch one of my other videos, ADHD, and how it impacts the different personality types. It'll give you a lot of insight into the pros and cons and how ADHD is involved. Moving along, we have the second helpful link and resource being provided by yours truly. We have the 5 different love styles. So on the first list of love styles here, out of the 5, we have number 1, the avoider. Avoiders, coming from homes that are often low in affection, but which place high value on independence and self-reliance. The avoider grows up learning only to take care of themselves, to deal with anxiety of having so little comfort and nurturing from their parents, etc., etc. You can read that on if you get that result later on. Or we have the second choice, the pleaser. Or we have the second choice, the pleaser. Pleasers usually grow up in homes with a parent who is overly protective, angry, and or critical. Pleaser children do everything they can to be good and avoid troubling their highly reactive parent, etc., etc. Or, the third option, we have the vacillator. Growing up with an unpredictable parent, vacillators' needs aren't top priority. Without consistent parental affection, they develop feelings of abandonment, etc., etc. Or perhaps you might be a controller. Controllers need control to ensure that the vulnerable and negative feelings they experience in childhood remain suppressed from their adult lives. Having control means having protection from feelings like fear, humiliation, and helplessness. However, anger is one of the However, anger is the one emotion that is not vulnerable. Or perhaps are you a victim? The victim. Kids survive a chaotic home environment by trying to stay under the radar, making themselves as invisible as possible. They'll hide and appease, learning how to escape into their own heads to lessen the pain from their angry, violent, chaotic parents, etc., etc. And that says quite a lot about someone. As we can see, a person's upbringing and the environment of which they grow up in is truly important. It says a lot about them and what they need and what's required sometimes for them. So something to look into if you're a partner, something for you guys to talk about. So I highly recommend that the both of you find out what your love style is each, so you can help each other out and better understand each other and help out the ADHD as well. Let's go on now to the next point, to the next helpful link. Next helpful link to help you out in your relationship is the Enneagram. The Enneagram examination is very interesting because it correlates quite a bit with your cognitive functions. So we see our skill set within our cognitive functions when we take the MBTI, and you see your 4 core functions. Now, what drives your personality is something different entirely a lot of the time, and that comes also from our childhood. It's hard to notice a theme. Our childhood is quite important. So, if you're a parent, really take that into consideration. But going back to what I was saying, the Enneagram exam, basically, it gets its information, interestingly enough, well, besides the questions, obviously, but it's a big reflection upon a lot of our childhood trauma. Now, all of us have different sorts of traumatic incidents of different levels and different varieties, and we were younger, and a lot of the time that's what forms our Enneagram function. So when I found out my Enneagram function, it was like, wow, this makes a lot of sense. And having inattentive ADHD and having it undiagnosed until my mid-20s, I can certainly understand why this is my Enneagram number. So a lot of introspection, a lot of deep dive learning I did for myself, and I'm like, wow, I have a lot of these characteristics, and wow, do I need to work on this and that and this and that. So you're probably going to have one of those moments as well. So I recommend you and your partner go individually and take the Enneagram exam so you can see what your biggest drives are. The Enneagram exam yields quite a bit of information. It's going to give you a lot of information as to what situations and circumstances can be helpful and which ones are not helpful, what you kind of need, what, habits and things of that nature that can certainly be a benefit to know for your partner and for yourself. So the Enneagram exam is really helpful, and I really recommend it. The link is down below. Let's move on down to the next part. And for the final point of assistance here, we have the 5 different love languages. There are 5 different ways in which some research has shown that people show and require affection. So go check that out. Go take the examination. But first, let's do a little talking about it. So here we have the 5 love languages. These are things that we do in order to display and show our love to our friends and our significant other and other people, etc., etc. So the 5 love languages. We have the first one. These are people who give words of affirmation, are very supportive, loving, encouraging to people. Then we have number 2. These are people who like to give gifts or like to receive gifts. It just makes the biggest difference in the world to them. And then we have 3, acts of service. These are people who appreciate being helped out, having things done for them. And this can be definitely very relatable to a lot of people with ADHD who had such a difficult time doing something when they were younger that having help with something meant so much that they grew to have that as their love language. So it could be that for certain people with ADHD. And we have the other one, we have quality time. These are people who just love spending time together with the person that they're interested in, their significant other, their family members, their friends. Just that quality time, that time between them and fill in the blank. And then we have number 5, we have people whose love language is physical touch. So take that as you will, and take the examination. So now that we've heard all the good links and the information presented, hopefully some of it can be of some use to you. So let's dive on into the guest of honor for this evening. We have the ISFP and the INFP. They're both FI DOMs, feeling introverts, and they're both TE inferior. So before we continue on to this video, I know quite a bit of INFPs and ISFPs. I've also had the privilege of working with some of y'all. And I know and understand that you guys don't like to be pigeonholed and feel like this doesn't all apply to me. Some of this does, some of this doesn't. So for the sake of ease on my behalf, I'm going to try to be as open as I can to the differences that there are, because there's not to say that one ISFP is going to be the same as another ISFP, and same goes for the INFP. You can have two people of the same exact cognitive functions in the same room, and they can be completely different people. Why? Because the 16 personality types within cognitive functions are just a foundation. There are millions of different iterations of those personality types, of those cognitive functions. And that all comes from the uniqueness of our lives, of our upbringing, of our culture, what we're into, what we're not into, what we're exposed to, etc., etc. So these are just some collective points. I ask you to please have an open mind and see what works and what doesn't work, and what applies to you, and perhaps what doesn't apply to you. And perhaps some of these things might not hit home right away. We might need to digest the idea perhaps a bit more, maybe for a longer time. It's not always easy accepting difficulties that we have with the ADHD and with our lives, but it is helpful to know what we struggle with and what our strengths are and what our weaknesses are. That way we can work on ourselves and work on our relationships and improve our quality of life for our friends or families, and most importantly, for ourselves. So let's have an open mind and let's do some learning, shall we? All right, let's do it. So we have the FI Dom, CE Inferior, the ISFP, INFP. So FI focuses on understanding individual experience by fostering awareness of the internal psychological world of values, needs, boundaries, limits, thoughts, feelings, emotions, preferences, etc., etc. When FI DOMs rely too heavily upon FI, they will identify with FI's activities, using the depth of personal experience to construct the foundation of their identity. Because of this, FI will continually feel threatened by the TE perspective, because TE has the potential to disrupt or shatter one's ego image. TE is focused on applying universal standards, judgments, as well as securing efficient outcomes through the making of broad generalizations. But FI tends to misinterpret TE as being cold, sterile, critical, uncaring, disrespectful, and even aiming to erase individual differences. Ultimately, FI forcefully rejects the TE perspective because it fears that universal standards and generalizations will degrade individual experience, and without valuing one's own experience, one's life no longer has any special meaning. So that's pretty deep stuff. That's what I'm talking about. A lot of ISFPs and INFPs, they really value their identity and who they are. And unfortunately, sometimes with perhaps certain family members, friends, the places of work or where they work and whatnot, they might have difficulty because they feel like they can't be themselves. And it's that inner struggle, like, why can't I just be me? Why can't people be cool with it? Well, we live in a world, unfortunately, where there's a lot of judgment, and there's also a lot of, malpractice by the mainstream media in terms of driving agendas, but that's for a whole nother topic. So let me not get off topic. Anyway, though, individuality, the ISFP, the INFP. They like their individuality and they appreciate who they are. And as I mentioned, I know quite a bit of ISFPs and INFPs, and I've had the privilege of working with some, and always an interesting conversation. I really love the appreciation of art and the appreciation of music out of my close friends that are ISFPs and INFPs. So, for those of y'all hearing this who are some of my friends, what up? And if you're just a casual listener or passerby, stick around. Hopefully you'll learn something. Hopefully you can apply this to your life or that of your relationship as well, and we can see stuff improve. So, let's continue on. Let's find out now what difficulties an ISFP or an INFP might have because of having ADHD and having these cognitive functions. Now, these things I'm going to mention, not all of them might apply to you, but perhaps some of them are going to apply to you. So, be on the lookout. What I did down below is I have a PDF link of all these points that I'm about to mention here. And there are quite a bit of them. It's not a lot, but it's a good amount. And I highlighted some of them in red, the ones that are more reminiscent of ADHD, not implying that the ones not highlighted in red are going to be ADHD oriented. A good amount of them are, but the ones in red is, from what I've seen and researched, it's a little more common with ADHD. So these things are going to be things of difficulty with or without the ADHD. The catch is the ADHD is just going to make it a whole lot worse. So whatever you got difficulty with already, you snap on the ADHD on there and it's just going to drive it into a really negative outcome sometimes. So it's better to know oneself. Knowledge truly is power, and the more we know ourselves, the more we can help ourselves out. When I found out my own cognitive functions and saw the difficulties I had, I was like, dang, I really, really struggle with a good amount of these things mentioned. I need to start working on them. I thought this was just something I struggled with. I didn't know there was other people with my own cognitive functions who had difficulty. And it was pretty spot on, too, which is really surprising the more you research. So anyway, I worked on mine. I've helped out a couple of people with this, too, and one step at a time. We can't take all these things on all at once, but it is important to at least start doing something if we see that we have difficulty in some of these areas. So these things might not all apply, but some of them might. So let's be on the lookout for ones that do. And yet again, as a reminder, I have the PDF link of the Google Doc down below where you'll see all these things mentioned. That way you can print out or download the Google Doc. That's going to include all these points, and you can be like, dang, I struggle with this. Checkpoint. You know what I mean? That way, if you and your partner need to work on it together, you all can find out what each other's cognitive functions, personality types are, and perhaps see their video as well. And if both the couple has ADHD, then I think it would be of much help. I'm going to do this for every cognitive function, every personality type is going to get this ADHD and difficulty video we're talking about today, just because I want to help you all out. ADHD is a really difficult thing and can really destroy, I've seen it destroy a lot of families. My family and I come from a family of counselors, and we've worked with people for many, many years, particularly my parents, and I've seen them work with so many people, and I've seen what the ADHD can do. When you realize how strong of a negative impact ADHD can have, it can destroy a family. And that sucks. Coming to terms with ADHD is not an easy thing. And neither is talking about stuff we have difficulty with. People with ADHD, we've been kicked. We've been made to feel horrible a lot of times in our life. So it's not always easy to talk about the things that we struggle with. So bear with me. I'm going to try to make it a bit entertaining and as encouraging, endearing, and charismatic as possible. So let's do some learning. Let's open up our minds, open up the heart, and let's see what we can do to improve ourselves. I truly believe each and every human being has the capacity to improve in their own capability. So weaknesses of FI DOMs. So, weaknesses usually stem from FITE imbalances. Often, have difficulty with fitting in due to dismissing outside standards. This point in red is really reminiscent of ADHD, because if we have ADHD, we're going to have trouble remembering, we're going to have trouble paying attention and sustaining that long attention while we're being given instructions, told something, or perhaps watching something. So sometimes it can be very difficult for us to fit in, and sometimes it's going to be very difficult for us to remember stuff. So issues with friends, socializing, and even maintaining a job can be, unfortunately, a difficulty. The next point in red, tend to struggle with many inner conflicts or low self-esteem. With having ADHD, we're going to embark on a life that is going to be filled with a lot of challenges for most of us, and we're going to have to really stand up for ourselves, and that can create an inner conflict. That certainly can create a lot of feelings of resentment, and that also can certainly create a low self-esteem. So it's very difficult, because unfortunately depression can be quite common if you have ADHD, so that's certainly something to look out for. And for you to stand up for yourself and do what you need to do, whether it's get counseling, therapy, do some research, get a social support group, or someone you can talk to, yeah, it would be of a lot of help. Just because having ADHD can certainly knock us down a couple of rounds, but hey, that doesn't mean we can't get back up and knock out our opponent and get the ADHD under control, if you will. So, next point, feel adrift. They cannot express their values into the world. Next point in red, uncomfortable with external structures, limits, and regulations. Now, with having ADHD, yeah, we're going to have a big zest for life sometimes, so to speak, and we're also going to not like having limits or schedules and regulations sometimes thrown our way, because we feel like we can't truly be ourselves, we can't do our art fully, we can't do certain things fully, and it might feel a little restrictive. So yeah, this could be an issue. The next point, rely too much on their own experience for interpreting external events, too subjective or even self-centered. So certainly, I've worked with a couple of ISFPs, INFPs who have such a subjective understanding of an experience that they can't really fathom the thought that other people would see stuff otherwise. And it's not always the case. Sometimes in specific scenarios that might be the case. So perhaps something for you to become introspective about. Start trying to balance out your thought processing to include a collective consciousness, if you will, of a more objective perspective sometimes. It's going to save you a lot of trouble in some instances. So this is something that certain introverts can also struggle with too. So anyway, moving on, next point, difficulty understanding that making good decisions involves using external standards and measurements of success or failure. So this could be because of an unbalanced perceiver type that doesn't have their J function so much on check that they use the external expectations or measurements of whatever system you're working on. So this is something I myself struggled with and really started working on when I realized that it was an area that I needed to work on. So anyways, you can do that too. Find a way. Next point in red, difficulty solving complex or entrenched problems and overlook opportunities to make longer term changes because of being too easily influenced by ever fluctuating personal needs. This is a big deal when it comes to ADHD, because a lot of the time we already feel really bad. We don't want to start working on something that's going to require follow-up through the weeks or days or months. We're like, we can barely even have the motivation to get started on it the first day. What the hell makes you think I'm going to be able to do it weeks down the line? And I'm not kidding you. This is something I've spoken to a couple of ISFPs and INFPs that they believe in themselves, but they don't believe that they're going to be able to follow up and learn a system or something that they're working on that requires a lot of follow-up. That's not a flaw of the individual. It's a flaw that is brought forth because of the ADHD not being taken care of. I guarantee you take care of the supplements that give you difficulty with motivation and concentration and good or improved short-term memory, you're going to be able to accomplish much more than you think at this moment. Because what you think at the moment, if you haven't gotten the ADHD taken care of, you have no other perspective but the perspective you have, which is not having the ADHD taken care of. I've gotten into some passionate conversations with some friends about this because it's something I truly believe. A lot of people, they give up on themselves. They have a very low self-esteem because they think, hey, I can't do this. I've tried many times. I just fail every time. Well, have you tried doing it by taking care of the ADHD and getting your treatment? By that, I mean finding something that works for you. For me, I started taking low-dose medication, low-dose stimulant medication that helped me out with dopamine and norepinephrine. That's what stimulant medication, the majority of them do. And then I started taking supplements to help fight off the oxidation and side effects of the medication. There weren't much, but still, you got to fight off the oxidation. It can get dangerous. Also, I started taking supplements to help out with the other major neurotransmitters that people with ADHD have difficulty with. And I was able to turn my life around. And my life changed so much for the better. My outlook on life, my goals, I was able to achieve so much more. And I'm aiming even higher as I go. I appreciate life and I love life a lot more. And I want to share and help other people to have that as well in their own way with what works for them. So if you're an ISFP, INFP, and you're having difficulty getting off your keister to go do something about your ADHD, or you don't even know where to start, go to your doctor, your healthcare professional, make an appointment, make a list, and start with that. Go see your doctor. Ask for a referral to a psychiatrist so you can go get an evaluation for the ADHD. I got plenty of videos that talk about supplements, and there's plenty of videos here on YouTube that talk about medication, and I have a video that talks about medication and supplements that you might want to check out. The link is up above. The resources are there. The research is out there. You got to help yourself out, and I know it's really hard to do that when we got ADHD. Perhaps some of you might not want to try medication, but you might want to try supplements first. And you can get supplements at a lot of grocery stores. I recommend supplements of higher quality that are much more organic and similar to that of which the body makes, if indeed it makes that neurotransmitter that you're trying to help out. So I truly believe that if you help out your ADHD, you're going to have a lot better results than what you would do otherwise if you weren't helping out the ADHD. So pick yourself up. Pick your head up, stop feeling sorry for yourself, and start doing something to improve yourself. Because your life matters. You want to live the rest of your life with your ADHD bringing you down and with the same problems and failures? Let me tell you something. I certainly wouldn't. Be the one that makes the change. You can bring along the change that you want to see, as cliche as that sounds. So if you're an INFP, ISFP listening or watching this video, you got the power within you. You just got to discipline yourself and go and do it. I believe you can. Next point. Can appear irrational, moody, selfish, or judgmental to others. Next point. Can be too private, inexpressive, and hard for others to know. This can come from anxiety and bad experiences, perhaps. Difficulty establishing predictable social interactions. Can place unreasonably high moral expectations on people. Easily offended if people do not share the same values. Dogmatic. Next point in red. Dislike being pigeonholed or wrongly judged by others. Oversensitive. Next point in red. High pressure to clearly define themselves and maintain their own identity, integrity, and values can lead to self-doubt, impulsive behavior, lashing out, or knee-jerk defensiveness of oneself. I've seen this a lot with a lot of ISFPs and INFPs that I've worked with. Yeah, the rejection-sensitive dysphoria, the RSD, can certainly make this even more of a challenge. For those of you who don't know, rejection-sensitive dysphoria, RSD, is a really immense negative feeling that people with ADHD get. This is due to the fact that our central nervous system is heightened. So we feel threats, we feel emotions, we feel anger, we feel sadness to a really high level, particularly when we feel like we've let somebody down, or like we didn't meet their expectations, or perhaps even our own, or when someone else has let us down. Perhaps they flaked on us, perhaps they didn't come through, and we tell ourselves, how could they do that when we've gone out of our way so much and they're just going to leave us hanging? So when stuff like that happens, it just feels horrible. We sometimes don't ever want to go to those places or see those people ever again. So that has to do with rejection sensitiveness for you. There's a link up above if you want to see a video where I talk more about it and what we can do to help ourselves out with it. So going back to the point though, it's very tough because I'm telling you, when you have ADHD, you have to stand up for yourself a lot. I know for myself, having inattentive ADHD, I had to stand up for myself like pretty much in like every grade I was ever in, like, including up until college. We got to be careful because of this, because we can get into a lot of arguments and perhaps fights and things of that nature if we don't keep ourselves on check. Sometimes some people might be telling us something, we might just take it the wrong way and just jump to conclusions because the RSD just gets lit up right away. So that's something to look out for. I urge you, learn about rejection sensitiveness for you if you haven't done so. It's really helpful. When I found out about it, it really explained a lot of things. And again, it's really helpful to know oneself rather than not knowing oneself, because then we can help ourselves out and help our partners out. If you have a partner perhaps that had difficulty with this, who's an ISFP or INFP, and you're like, oh, all right, well, I felt like the behavior of my partner was perhaps a little too intense or a little too negative, perhaps a bit exaggerated, and I didn't understand why. These aspects of ADHD, a lot of the time, are a reason as to why we act out the way we do. ADHD is a very intense condition, and for some of us, we have a very low reward system, so we don't feel good a lot of the time. And we're going to act out in ways that seem a bit more intense than would be necessary for a certain event. So this is something to look out for and something to work on and something to be considerate and helpful with if you're dating or married to someone who's an ISFP or INFP. And if you yourself are an INFP or ISFP, you can do it. Just learn about it. Learn about yourself. And if you have difficulty with some of these points right now, perhaps reflect on them at a different time when you feel better. Let's move on to the next point. The final point: difficulty integrating knowledge that falls outside of their own personal needs and experiences. So that's a lot of points to digest. And it can be a little tough to talk about them or to even accept them sometimes. Just because when you have ADHD, it's like we've been fighting for ourselves a lot of our life and having to stand up and, to people who don't understand why we have, who are giving us a hard time or expect stuff that's really difficult for us to do or practically not really possible in some instances or some stages. So, yeah, reflect upon these. As a reminder, again, all these points I just spoke about, I made a Google Doc where I included all that information, the links from the stuff earlier. So you and your partner, or you yourself, can get some help and, work on those points. When I found out my own difficulties with my cognitive functions, I highlighted all the ones I had difficulty with. And if you feel that you or your partner can do it, perhaps highlight the points after you download the form. Highlight the points that you struggle with or your partner struggles with. And then you can take them to a counselor or therapist in your area to help you out. And if you have kids, it's something I really recommend you to do. ADHD can really damage a family. It can really destroy a family. And I've seen ADHD destroy a lot of families. I've seen a lot of kids just be traumatized and have a lot of anxiety because their parents don't understand the ADHD, or a lot of the time don't want to understand the ADHD because they're not emotionally ready to handle the diagnosis. If you feel like you're one of those parents or individuals, I have a video that talks about ADHD and coming to terms with an ADHD diagnosis that you might want to check out. So now let's move on to what can really make an ISFP or INFP feel really harsh. What environments or situations or things are really difficult on the ISFP and INFP. This is important to note because as a partner, as someone who might be dating or married to an ISFP or INFP, these are really helpful things to know. And if you're an ISFP, INFP yourself, this is really helpful to know too. Because at that point, you're going to be able to better plan accordingly for certain things where you're not going to have the likelihood of having a negative time or things of that nature. Obviously, in life, a lot of things happen. We don't always have control over everything, but we do certainly have a choice in what we partake and what we do. So this is really helpful to know for a career and really helpful to know for your life as well. So let's discuss these points. Let's do some learning. How FI DOMs are triggered. Let's be careful though. FI DOMs can be emotionally triggered in a variety of ways, such as having an impersonal value violated, spending time in a negative, hostile, bottom line, or toxic social atmosphere, being subject to criticism, witnessing harsh criticism directed at others, undergoing experiences that spark fear of losing or being separated from important people, having their attachments to people demeaned or invalidated, seeing people callously ignore, dismiss serious personal, societal problems, dealing with people who are inauthentic or dishonest in relationships, dealing with people who are inflexible or domineering, dealing with people who rush into judgment without considering the viewpoints and feelings of others, feeling pressured to abide by rigid deadlines, rules, and routines or procedures, not being heard or feeling disregarded by others, feeling their efforts are unappreciated, being unable to coherently and convincingly verbalize their thoughts or feelings when they need to influence outcomes, feeling that their work is meaningless, feeling real or imagined inadequacy because of failure to set or reach personal goals. Now, that was quite a list of stuff, perhaps something to reflect upon. I'm sure that there's a couple of things in there you really relate to, perhaps, and it's important to know that when you're thinking of a career or a place of work or what you want to do sometimes, because if some of these things are going to be happening frequently, yeah, there's going to be a likelihood that you're going to be quite upset, or your partner might be quite upset frequently. So these are important things to know that you can help yourself out with, or you can help your partner out with as well. So these are some things to discuss, and these are some things to reflect upon. All this information will be in the Google Doc. So anyways, folks, I hope this video was of some help and brought some insight. I know it can be really tough to talk about a lot of the stuff we spoke about today, but I truly feel if you find out what's really up with you and you need help with, and if you start working and disciplining yourself and bringing forth positive change, I really feel that you can turn your life around. I really feel that if you take care of your ADHD, you're going to be able to conquer so many more things and so many more goals than you think are even possible at this moment. So anyway, I wish you all the best. This is your ADHD comrade, Wilhelm. Over and out.